Come on in, Bill.
Thank you, Eric. I'm almost tempted because it's recorded to say I'm Mike L from Oregon and then make a bunch of mistakes here. I was chatting him the answers as you were reading. That's how his hand came up so quick. He did not know that stuff. It's good to be here. He offended me right away. He's got a picture of my spiritual advisor in his background, like the Jerry Maguire movie. He had me with hello. I was defeated. And I was thinking as Derek was reading that, I don't think it's the people who don't comprehend how sick we are anymore that's the problem. I think there are quite a few that do. And thank God for that. I am more convinced. I'm always reluctant when someone says, have you completed the 12 steps? Because I asked my sponsor what to do when I'm done with the steps. He said, lay real still. I said, why? He said, because you're dead. This is a continuing practice for a lifetime. It says that in one of the stories. It's a program designed for limitless expansion. I think about the paragraph, I guess you call it the transition paragraph between 10 and 11, where it says that we need to grow in understanding and effectiveness. And I kind of went back to the instructions in step 10, where we answer the question that everyone in AA knows the answer at their first meeting. These aren't extravagant promises, right? We think not. And then you tell the newcomer, you got to be painstaking. I'm an alcoholic. I'm not going to work hard if there's not a payoff for me. Story of my life. But what am I growing in understanding and effectiveness of? I think when I enter the world of the spirit, it was a realm or a dimension that I wasn't in before I entered it. Before I entered the house, I was outside. And I think what we're doing is growing in understanding and effectiveness of that realm. And I think about it talks about we've begun to develop this vital sixth sense. And I said, well, what about the other five senses? Those are the ones that God provided us with to get through this realm, this world. And I also realized that although they are used for my survival, I use most of them for my own demise. When I see something, I form a judgment. Either I like it or I don't like it. I don't like Mike. I like my spiritual advisor. If something sounds foreign to me or against what I believe true, that comes into my ears. And what I realized is if I develop my vital sixth sense, that they will take precedence or dominance over the five senses that I use to form all my judgments in separation from the power. And if I do that long enough and follow the instructions in the book, because it says at the beginning, right, to show other alcoholics precisely, that means without deviation, we're going to give you exact instructions how we have recovered from this seemingly hopeless state of mind and body is the main purpose of the book. I don't want to spend $10 on a book. Let me go to meetings for a while. If that's precisely how they recovered, and then in the second chapter, they begin to tell me what they have, right? Because it says how it works. We read it at most meetings. If you want what we have, all of a sudden, because we're established and we're a fellowship and we kind of know each other, and we make it incumbent upon the guy walking through the door or into the Zoom room for the first time to know what it is we have. That's not his responsibility. That's ours. Our job is to present to him an adequate presentation of the steps, having had a spiritual awakening. Isn't that the message? That he could know what we have. I got to the point you asked how I established. Josh had sent me the message that you sent to him. Apparently he needed more instructions than I did. You know that I was like an AA phenom. But it says how he established his relationship with God was the premise of this meeting. Having taken the steps, how did you? There were a lot of ways I found out not to establish a relationship with God, and I didn't know that I was looking for him all the time. I was looking in the wrong places, looking in the wrong platforms, atmospheres, and I know this much. Sometimes it's sufficient to come through that door with just saying, I don't want what I have anymore. That's enough. I remember being in a meeting in Fort Myers and they brought up the topic of honesty. And people with a lot of time were kind of compelling the new guy with 3 hours that he needed to be rigorously honest. And but one guy finally said, give the guy a break. Sometimes enough honesty for the grace of God to enter in is when an alcoholic says, this shit's got to stop. If I can get to the point where whatever it is that's happened in my life has to stop, I admit that to someone, whether or not I ask for help. I don't know. That's like a big order. I don't like asking for help. I remember when I was trying out for AA, Eric, thank God you didn't ask for my credentials, and I'll give them though out of respect for you because I got some friends here. I could lie for so long, but not to where it would not make me feel good about myself, because then I got to see everyone that was on this meeting and I've got to avoid every meeting they're at because I don't like to get caught in a lie. Isn't that crazy? But I have been trying out for AA for about 14 years at the time. My divorce was settled. I was current on my child support and alimony at the time. I was working a good job and I showed up at this sober establishment called Rebos. And I was so clueless. I've been coming to AA religiously for 14 years and didn't know that Rebos spelled sober backwards. And I thought it was a motorcycle club because they had all these Harley Davidsons out front. I didn't know it was like an AA club that rented area to meetings. And I went in there and they said, if you want what we have, and I did, I wanted a motorcycle. So I saved money on this job and I went out and bought a brand new Harley Davidson motorcycle. I didn't want to wait. I'm an alcoholic. Why wait? They were selling them for $3,000 or $4,000 over sticker. The guy put his name on a waiting list. He got the bike. He paid $6,200 for it the day before. He put an ad in the paper and I went and paid him $10,000 because I wanted a bike. I went up to Tampa. I bought the bike. I took the truck from work and the trailer. I drove up. I put the bike on the trailer and drove it all the way back to St. Pete. And then for the next 30 days, I trailered it to the club because I didn't know how to ride it. And a bigger problem than that, I didn't want to tell anyone I didn't know how to ride it because they might think I'm an idiot. Why would you buy a motorcycle for $3,000 over sticker and not know how to ride it? So I'd have to get to Rebos real early, take the bike down off the trailer, put it where they parked the motorcycles, put the truck in the trailer way out back because there was a big field there, and then stand by the bike with my arms folded, waiting for the rest of the guys to come up. Then I'd have to wait till after the meeting, 2.5 hours, till no one could see me load the bike back up. After 30 days, I hated them because I didn't know how to ride a bike. I said, I'll teach myself how to ride. And I did about $3,000 worth of damage to my new Harley Davidson. But when I got done getting it repaired, I was a full-fledged motorcycle rider. I didn't know that for $30 or $60 at the time, I could have taken a driver's course on how to ride a motorcycle. Why would I come in here and get a manual or ask a sponsor to help figure it out myself? I'm like Ford Motor Company. I always seem to come up with a better idea. Well, now I came to the meeting and when they repaired the bike, these weren't like the old Harleys that made that loping sound, but I had them cut the pipes off so that they would sound real loud. So when I came to the meeting now, instead of getting there 3 hours early, I came right at about the time they were saying the Serenity Prayer because they would hear me rev up the bike as I turned it up and walked in with all this stuff, this apparatus, right? My AA starter kit. That's a helmet. You had to wear them at the time and goggles and a leather and chains. None of that made me a biker any more than sitting in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous makes me a member of AA. Certainly I meet the requirement, but that doesn't make me a member of Alcoholics Anonymous in any type of standing. It just means I tell you that I want to stop drinking. Big deal. Give me the microphone because it's my turn to talk. Well, they weren't too impressed with my Harley Davidson and me coming in during the Serenity Prayer. So they said, quit making so much noise. So I really got offended with them. And about 90 days later, since no one was impressed with my motorcycle, and I had done nothing but buy a motorcycle to put in defense in between me and the first drink, no one was more surprised than me when 90 days later I was driving down the south side to show Ray Ray and Pookie and Boo Boo how good I was doing now that I wasn't getting high and going to A&A. And about a week later, I didn't realize they were avid motorcycle riders and I was sitting there smoking my life away again. Just for the record, and alcoholism for me is not substance specific. I picked up a drink, it tenderized me, it opened up the incomprehensible and demoralization gates. So I've tried just about everything that you can try to get outside of myself or change the way I feel, seeking this relationship with the power that had been there the whole time. The point that I was led to some pretty incomprehensible demoralization, just like it talks about in the book. It wouldn't matter. I meet the description of the alcoholic. I put a drink inside of me and it has an abnormal reaction, an adverse response. I get thirsty. It doesn't quench my thirst. It creates a greater one. And what happens is I tend to overdrink, or like you guys say, they overserve me. I get in trouble because of my drunkenness. I do stupid things and think that's the sanity I need to be restored to, is that when I get drunk next time, I won't be so stupid. The insanity is that I know that once I take a drink, I get thirsty. When I get thirsty and take a drink, I overdrink and I get in trouble and I don't want to do it again. And I promise myself I won't do it again. And I promised my wife at the time, becoming my ex-wife, because I did it again. I promised my probation officer and the judge and the psych wards and the counselors and the therapists and the job and everyone that'll listen that this time I mean business. And I buy motorcycles and get different jobs, different lovers, go on vacation, can't leave the county, can't leave the state because I'm on federal probation or felony probation. I turned a parking ticket down in Fort Myers into 6 years of probation. Violated so many times, I did a year in the county and they put me on probation again. I mean, it was just doomed to failure. It was kind of like a restraining order that I had with all my relationships. I was thinking about, I shared a meeting the other day. Restraining orders are for people who can't restrain themselves. I wouldn't have to have a judge tell me to leave these people alone if I would have listened to them or their parents or their husbands or the neighborhood watch. Restraining orders are for people who can't restrain themselves. Just like abuse is for people who can't drink. Unless, of course, you have an obsession of the mind, because abuse doesn't stop us any more than court papers, restraining orders, a threat that I'm going to lose my wife or my job or my freedom or my sanity. I have no defense, in the way that I live demands that I drink. And the way that I live prohibits me from developing a relationship with the power deep within me. I didn't know how blocked I was. Having said all that, I tried out for AA for 41 years till I got to the point where there was nothing left that I could put between me and the power except a bullet in my mouth. I think that's the question, right? How do you establish a relationship with God? I eliminated every possible avenue to not find God till there was nothing left. I love what it says and how it works. There was nobody left, nobody but one, and that one is God. I didn't realize how close he had been. You know, you said at the beginning, not frothy emotional appeal, and there's really not. I mean, my story is more of a, you talk about Jack Nicholson and the One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I'm more like Jack Nicholson in The Shining. Being sober without a program of recovery makes Billy a dull boy. Red rum, here they come. I'm ready to kill everyone around me because I think that they're the problem and I'm losing my mind sober. I am a case of what the book calls a real alcoholic, in the hopeless state of mind and body, the hopeless type, the one that has entered into a region through which there is no human aid. And I never, ever understood the unmanageability of my life. I was at a meeting a few weeks ago and a gal put it, and I've never heard it this way. She said I was a model client, a model patient, and a model inmate. She said I needed structure in my life. And I thought, that's the story of my life. I did not know how to live independently of someone telling me when to get up. Halfway houses I did great in. I remember my 14th treatment center, the counselor told me I needed to be quiet for 48 hours and have a sponsor by Monday or he was going to throw me out because my group was doing better than his and he was the director. I knew the book, I knew the program, and I had all the answers. What I never understood was the unmanageability of my life. That without someone telling me what time to get up, what time, I was in the Salvation Army and did tremendous there for 90 days. They get us up at 5 in the morning, you get coffee, you go in the chapel, they put the word of God in you. You go to work 3 hours at the warehouse, they pay you for 8. I got a raise from $7 the second week to $8 the third. I was a real overachiever. Go to a meeting, in by 10, lights out by 11. If I could live by that structure today, my life would be wonderful. The problem is I got out of the Salvation Army. I got a job and I got a paycheck. And what happened is I started to put as many hours a day in as work as I could to outrun my alcoholism. I took one day off from that job. One day I worked 180 days straight, 6 months. I made a lot of money. I took one day off and I got thirsty. I overdrank. I wanted to come down, so I went over to the east side of Fort Myers to get a high-powered sedative. When you're talking in AA real time, they call that crack. They didn't want me there. They threw a projected missile and knocked all my teeth down my throat. How am I going to go to a job on day 181, taking one day off, when on day 179 I had a full grill and now I got no teeth in my... What am I going to do? How do you explain that? I got to make up some story. I remember a guy came over my house and he saw me trying to get a drink inside of me out of respect for this meeting and this platform, trying to get something inside of me, and the blood was dripping down and I couldn't do it. He looked at me and he started crying. I'm thinking, why is he crying? I'm the one who can't get the drink inside of me. And he gets on the phone and he calls my model sponsor, David, who did everything except shove a big book down my throat to help me get sober. And he started crying. He said he's got all of his teeth knocked out and he's trying to get a drink in them. And David realized he was as powerless as I was. What I didn't realize is it broke his heart to see me in this condition. Yeah, sometimes we don't comprehend the sickness of the alcoholic. I don't know how he forced me to go to a dentist and the guy put a fake bridge in my mouth. They tried to save 3 or 4 of the bottom teeth, but they couldn't do that. And I was out celebrating again. I can't give up 9 months of my life and all my teeth like that for one day out. You understand, I've got to get my money's worth. And then another 5 or 6 years of my life was gone. And I'm sitting in the meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, doing the best I can. So I take up some other... Is this a message of recovery, Eric? I mean, I'm describing alcoholism, but you understand the steps and the remedy and the surrenders in there, right? Okay. Cut me off if you want. You know, I got a million stories. I got to tell you one about a story that I saw, because sometimes I believe this is where the hope comes in. We had a guy, he's since passed. I'm going to give you his name, was Chucky Bankston. He got sober at the Newberg Group in Cleveland, Ohio, 70 years ago. He went through Rosary Hall with Sister Ignatia. I am sitting in the atmosphere of grace. I've been coming to AA religiously for a little better than 43 years. And the way Bob B., my grant sponsor, describes me is, he said, you were standing in the river for 41 years, dying of thirst, telling everyone how good the water tasted. And that was the story of my life. I wanted to get sober. I would come and say, this time I'm going to try harder. I didn't know that trying harder was part of the illness, never part of the solution. Lack of power is my dilemma. Lack of the ability to effect a trying experiment that's going to relieve me of my alcoholism. God could and would if he were sought, not if he were defined, not if he were found, not if I knew where he was going to be on Sunday. I was so agnostic because of what I was taught, that I knew there was one way to the Father and I was going to heaven. I was going high or not, but I was going. Unfortunately, the judgment that billed as anyone who didn't believe the way I lived, they were going to the other place. And that's sad when you're separated from God's kids and know that I'm going to be the only one in heaven and the rest of you are going to hell. But you all seem to be going sober, happy, joyous, and free. What's the problem? The problem is I'm blocked from the power from the story that's in my head. Chucky told an amazing story. This was back in the days before he got sober 70 years ago, where they would put an alcoholic in an asylum for insanity. And that's where he ended up. For 11 years, he was in a psych ward, tethered to a bed. When the nurses would come in, he spit on them. And finally, God sent an angel, someone who knew that Chucky was an alcoholic and not deranged. And she said, in one day, she said, Chucky, I'm going to put some salve on your arms because they were just borne down to the bone from him yanking on these tethers. And he said, please let me out, sister. She was a nun. Please let me out of these tethers. She said, Chucky, you spit on the nurses. He said, what's wrong with me? She said, Chucky, I think you're an alcoholic. She said, if you promise me that you won't spit on me. And she took those tethers off and she put salve on him and showed him some love. That's all he needed, was a little human touch. And all of a sudden they set him free. He went to Rosary Hall. Sister Ignatia touched him and he got sober and died in St. Petersburg 10, 15 years ago with almost 60 years sober. The stories that I heard in AA, it says in the book, The Age of Miracles is still with us. Do I underestimate the power of God because I see on this two-dimensional platform? Dick Poughton, one of the members of the same group, got sober in the 50s. What a story I heard. And here's the problem. See, I wasn't in an insane asylum yet. I wasn't tethered yet. And I didn't live in Brookside Park. Therefore, I couldn't be an alcoholic. I didn't realize that my attraction to alcohol or my abstinence from alcohol had nothing to do with alcoholism or recovery, except when I was drinking or trying to outrun it. I had a spiritual malady, I had something inside of me that left untreated. It's not personal. I go back and take a drink, and then I hang out with some people who don't understand any alcoholism any more than the people who don't have it. And they say, well, you want to drink more than you want to stay sober. I got no defense for them because I'm the one who drank. I say, I guess you're right, but why is it that when I wanted to stay sober more than I wanted to drink, I drank? Powerless. I didn't understand it. Maybe I was around some hard drinkers, some moderate drinkers. There's some people that could stay sober by just not drinking and being haven around their friends, but I'm not that guy. I had something growing inside of me from a child, and I knew it. There was something wrong with me. When I picked up a drink, I didn't become a greater dancer, greater lover, any better looking than I thought I was. I was narcissistic before I ever drank. But I got relief from the demonology that was growing inside of me that I knew was there. That's all I got. I was thinking about there was no happiness. I used to do other stuff and lock myself in a bathroom or peer out the windows. I went to a young people's conference in AA in 1995. Got drunk and got high and looked out the peephole for 3 days and got trespassed from the island. I said I could have saved $1,500 and stayed home and done that, powerless, no defense. Sitting in the meeting, Sydney asked for being sponsored by conference speakers. And one day I had enough. I was 9 months sober, living at my brother's house. No driver's license, 2 felonies, no car, no savings. At retirement age, I had drank up 4 decades of my life, knowing that the miracle was here, and for some reason I couldn't get it, and I wanted out of my life. I love the fact that, are my lips white now? No, okay, they should be. I'm foaming at the mouth, but it's not from dishonesty or over talking. I made the mistake of leaving the nicotine lozenge in my mouth. I can tell you I quit smoking that, but that'd be a lie. I just switched seats on the Titanic. Let me wipe it off though, so I don't feel like a freak. Don't you love AA? I can take off all my clothes here, and the sicker I am, the more you love me. If I'd have known that, I'd have quit drinking a long time ago and just acted sick. So I'm at my brother's house, and it says this in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, perhaps the most important line for me. It is better to meet with God alone than with someone who might misunderstand. And when you're planning to take your life, my mom's in an assisted living. She'll know about it, but it won't affect her as if she was in the free world. My sister loves me. My brother feels sorry. There was no one there. It was the coldest day of the year. I couldn't get to a meeting, and I could put nothing between me and me. And I realized that at 62 years old, I had way more life behind me than ahead of me. And how could I ever get out of the position that I put myself in? I believe it's just crushed by a self-imposed crisis. And as I was coming up with a plan to execute my suicide mission, something happened. The sponsor said the great gardener had been planting seeds for 40 years of my life. And on that day, of total surrender. When all my scorecards read 0, it was like God played a Netflix series in my mind of all the miracles I'd seen for 40 years in AA. You would think he was tormenting me with that because it had eluded me. But I think what he was showing me, he was giving me a vision for you. A vision for you. Could that be for me, God? Could that be for me? Because I've tried everything. I've gone the distance. I've given it all I have. I ain't got no more fight left. My sponsor said, surrender is when there's no more fight left. I'm not quitting no more. I quit, and I give in. You can take me. You got me. Maybe I was designed to be, when I got sober at 21 years old, I was at a treatment center with a guy that was 71. And I said, when I'm his age, I'll have 50 years sober. That'll be a big deal. And I'm about being a big deal. And at 24, the first time I picked up, I said, well, I can make 74, 50 years. And then all of a sudden my 30s were gone. And I said, I might not make 80. Finally, at 62 years old, my sponsor gave me the magic. He said, why don't you put a value on one day without a drink? Quit worrying about being a big shot. I surrendered. I said, God, I'll do anything. That's it. It's the bargaining. That's the condition. That's the caveat in step 3. God, I offer myself to thee. If you do something with me, I'll bear witness to anyone. A lot of things had to take place. I remember a guy telling me before I got sober, well, I was in the crisis center in St. Pete. He said, you're going to have to stop lying and cheating to get honest. I said, well, I'm from the Cleveland Akron area. We practice the 4 absolutes. I'll wait till I'm rigorously honest and then I'll quit lying. That made sense to me. He said, it's never going to work. I made a concerted effort to not tell any fabricated stories and to not take anything that didn't belong to me. And what happened is, for the first time in my life, when I invited the Spirit of truth, he had something to come into. I hadn't told a lie for 9 months. The only thing I took was a candy bar, and that was at a week sober when I was in the crisis center. Just in case I needed to survive, in case I didn't make it, I want to make sure I go to Walmart and get a candy bar. But because I started participating with an honesty that I could establish, the Spirit of truth could come in. And after that surrender, I went downstairs. Within 4 days, I was sitting there at my brother's kitchen table. They were sleeping. I got up real early and I started to write. And I saw myself for what I was at my own hands. I had a moment of clarity sober, and I didn't like what I saw. I looked at my sex inventory, the conduct, the way I treated women, the way I talked to women, the way I took advantage of women, the way I maybe let myself be taken advantage of, because it wasn't about sex. I had a conversation with a few of my friends here today. Fortunately, they didn't come to the meeting, so they won't feel embarrassed. And you know that I know more now than ever that the problem centers in our mind. And I say that to say this: there are people on this platform here that I can't touch, that are engaged in some real twisted, self-serving, self-seeking behavior that's harmful in the area of sex conduct. And it has nothing to do with sex, because it's not happening. The problem's up here. And if I get someone vulnerable enough on this platform that'll let me talk to them or get them to exchange certain favors over a line. I had a friend who went to UK to have a relationship with a girl, and he was engaged to one over here. Why would you go that far? I don't know. Do you think you're going to get away with it, or was there something enticing about this romance that comes on this platform here? I pay attention to that. Sometimes this looks like a yearbook to me. I start rating the females on it like Facebook. Oh my God, she's beautiful. I'm in love. I don't even know if she speaks English or if she likes anything that I like. My 5 senses, if I feed on those rather than the vital 6 sense, I can get in trouble sober right here on Zoom, and I've never held hands with any of you. I know this much, that I go to a lot of in-person meetings, not just because I'm in Cleveland, but because I remember what it was like to sit with a guy who drank himself to death. But before he did that, I sat with him all night on what we know is a 12-step called They're Almost Obsolete. sit with him and feed him Karo syrup and orange juice, because if he had any more alcohol, it would have killed him. And watch him come to and watch the snot and the blubber and him wiping stuff off of him, animals and on the walls that weren't there. Like Dick Pountney said, if we're not careful, we'll give up our birthright in Alcoholics Anonymous to the professionals. You can't even get into a detox or a hospital that's AMA chartered because of some HIPAA or whatever laws they got. We can't go in and meet with the new guy when he's at his sickest, where we can thrive because God shows us what we are without him. And that I can see that there's hope when one alcoholic shares with another, and recovery begins, like it says in the forward to our second or third edition. We got to be careful. And if I'm not careful, to be honest with you, I didn't leave the house today. Not yet. I haven't gone outside except to walk the dog. But that's because I got a home group at 6:15. I got a commitment with my sponsor's home group at 12:30. I did a 2-hour big book moderation, which means I've already run my mouth for 2 hours today. I guess I was just getting warmed up. I didn't think I have nothing to say here. I overwhelmed myself again. And I made a commitment to do this. But if I'm not careful, that can become my life, and that's not real life. This is 2-dimensional. I got to be 3-dimensional if I'm going to access the 4th dimension. I can't afford to kid myself. I was telling someone the other day, this may be the new AA. This may be AA, in which case World Service Office got to go away. We don't need them to go online. In which case, if we're not careful, the gift this God's given us, known as Zoom, the Watsonian movement may be a foreshadowing of what Zoom could do to AA if we're not careful. He makes a statement at the beginning of the meeting. I've already forgotten about it, and maybe so have you. Tradition 7, each group should be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. I do service on a meeting that's a very big platform. They meet twice a week and they make an announcement every week. Last week, we had 112 people here. We collected one donation for $1.17. Well, I'll let you worry about it. I'm popping from Zoom to Zoom. I'm a Zumba instructor. I don't know the value of putting money in the basket because I can't see the basket. I can't touch the basket. I don't have any cash in front of you. I'm going to give you my credit card. You're a bunch of alcoholics. You got me twisted. And the reality is the greatest thing in the world loses its flavor because we're not careful. The traditions and the concepts. I'm a GSR at a Zoom meeting, but I've not been a GSR at any meeting, period. So it's a start for me. But I go to meetings because God blessed me with a car against all odds. I told you I told you I didn't have a license. I finally got it back. Took care of the fines. The felony wore out. Got a little job washing dishes. And I got a car. After 22 banks had turned me down, my sister, who knows nothing, told me, why don't you call the credit union? So what the hell does she know? I was in the car business for 30 years. I called the credit union. They said, when you want to get your car? I lived my life making judgments about people that I deemed knew nothing about nothing and denied myself for God's opportunity to come, and we must be rid of this selfishness or it kills us. Here's how it kills us. I don't like the way you look, the way you sound, the way you feel, the way you smell. So I discount you, and I look for evidence to support my judgment so I can be right. And one by one, I put out every candle that God puts in my life to ignite my flame. Well, I could not turn my will and life over to the care of God without God's help. I told you what happened. When I got done with that 4th step, I was appalled. I went to my sponsor and we spent 3 6-hour sessions doing my 5th step. And when I finally got done with the last resentment, the last sex conduct and fear inventory, I said, hallelujah, I can go home and do 6 and 7. He said, I don't know about that. I said, is this some kind of twisted joke? I told you everything. He said, I don't believe that you didn't. He said, I believe that's the most thorough 5th step I have ever heard. He said, but I believe it's a 3-part step. And I kind of scratched my head and said, what are you talking about? He said, I believe it says we admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being. He said, I bear witness that you shared your story with me and you wrote it. You bear witness to yourself. But have you had a talk with God? I didn't really have a talk with God. I had a meeting with God, like I told you, but I didn't have a talk with God. I remember asking David once, I was in the car business and I was a phenom. God gave me a gift and I was also driven, ego, and I'd prove to someone I could never sell enough cars. I mean, next guy next to me, he sold 18 cars, I sold 70, and there wasn't enough cars for me. I remember saying to David, I said, David, can a blessing ever be a curse? And he said, absolutely. I said, how? He said, when you beat yourself on the chest and say, look at me. Anonymity, the spiritual foundation, God, the ultimate anonymous authority that lets me get the credit for what's coming out of my mouth if I so take it. And he sits back and he still graces me. But I know it's him. I just told you what I did at my own hands for 41 years. You got me twisted if you think I'm going to tell you I did this. Beating myself on the chest. I spent a couple hours talking to God. I remember that I was led to the 51st Psalm. That's where King David had got some lady pregnant and sent her husband off to be killed. And here's what he said when the guy had confronted him with the truth. He wept. He said, God, I'm sorry. Please don't take your spirit from me. Withhold not your Holy Spirit. I said, God, I'm sorry. You've given me gifts and I've done nothing with them. Please forgive me, and whatever you do, don't abandon me. I'll tell you what, that's the sincerest 7-step prayer one could make. My sponsor said the verbiage of the 7-step prayer, he really impressed me with this. My Creator, I'm now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. He said, doesn't that sound like a wedding vow? Will you have all of me, good and bad? Will you take me for sickness and health, poor, rich? I said, well, I remember meditating on 3 days. One day at the lake home, I called him out in Los Angeles. I said, Ralph, I know where the engagement took place. Step 3, God, will you have me? He said, yes. And then the next few steps, you got to clean out the place because he's going to live in his rightful inhabitation in my life, which is in my heart. He goes in, he guts me like Shawshank Redemption. You got to go through 200 meters of feces to come to the other side. But when Andy came out, he stood in the rain. He was being washed in healing rain and held stand up in a V for victory. If I'm willing to go through that tunnel of cesspool of life, resentment, fear, misconduct, and years of sex and relationships and share it with another human being, I make so much room for the grace of God to come in. Why would I ever want to drink again? I don't want to ever be that guy. God, please change me. And then I begin to make amends. I visit my mom who's in the assisted living 3 or 4 times a week. Some days I'm tempted to push her into the water where we walk around. And I promise you, if I didn't have to see her bubble before she gave up her breath, maybe I would do it, but I would never want to see her suffer. Not because I don't love my mom, but the condition she's in is not the life that she lived. But I don't get mad at God. I remember when she first got diagnosed with Parkinson's 15 years ago, one of my buddies said, you want us to pray for your mom to be healed? I said, no. They said, why don't you love your mom? I said, of course. But if I pray for God to heal my mom and he doesn't heal her, I either get mad at him or quit believing in him, and I can't afford that. I don't like the condition my mom's in. She's bedridden in wheelchair. And what happened is I started on some of these things. I was making a check mark perfunctory visit, like stopping in a meeting, getting a cup of coffee and leaving before I hear the message. And I told my sponsor, it's almost like she's dead already. I'm just waiting for her to quit breathing. And then I prayed about it. And the next time I went, you know what I did? I remember what my sponsor told me 10 years ago. He said they like to be touched and they need to have human interaction. Make sure what I did is I started holding hands with her and kissing her. And next thing you know, instead of making a perfunctory 5-minute visit to say, yeah, I saw my mom before she died, I have intimacy with my mom. Believe me, my mom experienced every drink, every jail sentence, every psych ward, every hospitalization, every rehab that I went through. She did it sober. I promise you today, my mom has more gratitude for you people in Alcoholics Anonymous and our higher power than I'll ever have. She got 2 kids that are sober. She got 2 grandkids that are sober. Alcoholism took her dad and took mine. guess what? If I stay with you guys and continue to do this, it ain't gonna get me. I don't know what else to say, Eric. I don't want to get off on more frothy emotional appeal and have you have Josh Baker come in and correct me. I think I'm gonna call it a wrap.
Bill, that was absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much.